We need to talk about what's going on with inflation. No, you're not hallucinating when you go to the grocery store. Things are definitely more expensive. Oh, and we need to talk about this guy. But first, let's talk about the facts and the numbers. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Consumer Price Index report released this morning found inflation increased just a little bit. It's up 0.2% between June and July of this year, but it remains steady year over year, increasing 2.7% when compared to July of last year. Now, I say steady because a 2.7% year-over-year increase is exactly what we saw in the month of June when compared to June of last year. So no dramatic movements in inflation, but 2.7% is not what the Federal Reserve wants to see. They want to see that number at 2%, not 2.7, not 2.5, not 2.3, 2%, and we are not there. In fact, this inflation number is trending in the wrong direction, up. And here are the reasons why. Let's start with the big categories, the things we all use every single day. Food is up almost 3% year over year. Energy is down more than 1.5% year over year, and shelter is up almost 4% between July of this year and July of last year. When we talk about food, as I mentioned, you're not imagining it. Things are expensive at the grocery store. Beef, eggs, and coffee are all way more expensive than they were last year, and so is going out to eat at a restaurant. The report today found ground beef was up 11.5% between July of this year and July of last year. Steaks were up more than 12% year over year. Coffee was up 14.5% year over year, and eggs were up more than 16% year over year. Going out to a restaurant to eat cost you almost 4% more this July than it did last July. Now, I mentioned overall energy was down. That's mostly because gasoline for your car was down 9.5% between July of this year and July of last year. But that's being offset by something else. I want to call your attention to natural gas for your home. That number spiked almost 14% year over year. Now, the number the Federal Reserve closely watches in this specific report is what's called core inflation. Core inflation measures all of the categories in the CPI report without including food and energy, which are always really volatile. And this number gives economists and the Federal Reserve a good indicator of the underlying trends of inflation. According to today's report, core inflation was up 3.1% year over year. That is obviously higher than the overall number of 2.7% that we saw in July. That 3.1 number is the largest monthly increase for core inflation so far this year. This number could be signaling more pressure on the economy from the tariffs. Lastly, I want to talk to you about this guy. Why is he so special? Because he is President Trump's nominee to lead the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the agency responsible for this and many other critical government economic reports. You'll remember just a few weeks ago, Trump fired the last BLS commissioner because he said the jobs numbers under her were rigged to make him look bad. Well, this guy is definitely a Trump guy. E.J. Antoni is currently the economist at the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation, of course, is the force behind Project 2025. As for Antoni himself, he needs to be confirmed by the Senate before he can take over at BLS. But he has been a vocal critic of the agency and a critic of the methodology, so the way they calculate these reports. Of course, there is always room for improvement, and some BLS collection practices are definitely old and antiquated. But BLS data is known around the world as the gold standard. Antoni suggested today that the BLS should end the practice of releasing a monthly jobs report, at least until he gets into position so he can fix how these numbers are calculated. Now, the White House did not go that far on his plan, but they are definitely all about changing the way the data is collected by BLS, and they're thrilled with Antoni.
We want to ensure that all of the data, the inflation data, the jobs data, any data point that is coming out of the BLS is trustworthy and is accurate, which is why the president has restored new leadership at the BLS.